The lantern flame flickered across the weathered boards of the barn, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts across the hay-strewn floor, and Samuel Zimmerman froze when he saw her huddled in the corner, 3 small children sleeping peacefully in her protective embrace. He had returned to his ranch outside Roswell, New Mexico territory, late that October evening in 1878, bone-weary from driving cattle to the railhead in Las Vegas. The journey had taken 2 weeks longer than expected, and all Samuel wanted was to unsaddle his horse, check on his livestock, and collapse into bed. Instead, he found himself staring at a woman who looked like she had been through hell and barely survived to tell the tale. Her dress was torn and dirty, her dark hair tangled and matted with what looked like road dust. But even in the dim light, Samuel could see the fierce determination in her eyes as they met his. She did not cower or cry out. Instead, she straightened her shoulders, careful not to disturb the sleeping children, and lifted her chin. "Please," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "We just need one night. We will be gone by morning." Samuel set the lantern down slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered from years of ranch work, and he knew he could be intimidating. The last thing he wanted was to frighten this woman or the children any more than they already were. "You are not going anywhere tonight," he said quietly. "Not in your condition." Her eyes widened, and he saw fear flash across her face. "I can pay you," she said quickly. "Not much, but I have a little money sewn into my hem. We will not be any trouble." "I am not asking for payment," Samuel replied. He studied the children more closely. 2 girls and a boy, he guessed, ranging in age from maybe 3 to 7 years old. They were thin, their clothes as ragged as their mothers. "When did you last eat?" The woman's jaw tightened, and Samuel saw tears gather in her eyes, though she blinked them back stubbornly. "Yesterday morning. Some bread a farmer's wife gave us outside Santa Rosa." Santa Rosa was nearly 80 miles north. The realization of how far she had traveled with 3 small children, on foot by the looks of it, made Samuel's chest tighten with something he could not quite name. "Can you walk to the house?" he asked. "I have soup on the stove. It has been simmering since this morning, so it should still be warm." She hesitated, clearly torn between pride and desperate need. Samuel watched her gaze drop to the children in her arms, and he saw the exact moment she made her decision. Pride was a luxury she could not afford, not when she had 3 mouths to feed besides her own. "Yes," she whispered. "Thank you." Samuel stepped forward and carefully lifted the smallest child from her arms, a little girl with blonde curls who could not have been more than 3. The woman stiffened but did not protest. He tucked the child against his chest, marveling at how light she was, and gestured toward the barn door with his free hand. "Can you manage the other 2? "I have been managing them for 3 weeks, she said, and there was a hint of steel in her voice that Samuel found himself admiring. She gathered the other children, a boy of about 6 and a girl who looked 7, and stood on shaky legs. The walk from the barn to the house was short, but Samuel watched the woman stumble twice. He wanted to help her, but his arms were full with the little girl, and he suspected the woman's pride would only allow her to accept so much charity in one night. His ranch house was modest but well built, constructed of adobe in the Spanish style with thick walls that kept out the worst of the summer heat and winter cold. Samuel had purchased the property 5 years ago with money saved from his years working as a trail boss, and he had spent those years building it into something he could be proud of. 200 acres of grazing land, a small herd of cattle, and enough horses to make a decent living breaking and selling them to the army fort outside town. He pushed open the door and was greeted by the familiar scent of home, wood smoke and leather, and the beef soup he had started that morning before heading out to check the fence line. The woman followed him inside, her eyes taking in everything with the quick, assessing gaze of someone who had learned to evaluate potential dangers. "You can put them on my bed," Samuel said, nodding toward the bedroom door. "I will sleep out here tonight." "We cannot take your bed," the woman protested. "You can and you will." Samuel's tone left no room for argument. He carried the little girl into the bedroom and laid her gently on the quilt his mother had made before she died. The child stirred but did not wake, her thumb finding its way to her mouth. The woman brought in the other two children, settling them beside their sister. For a moment, she just stood there, looking down at them with such naked love and exhaustion on her face that Samuel had to look away. It felt too intimate, like he was witnessing something private. "Come eat," he said gruffly, walking back to the main room. He ladled soup into 2 bowls and set them on the rough-hewn table, then cut thick slices from a loaf of bread he had bought in town 3 days ago. The woman sank into a chair like her legs could no longer hold her, and Samuel noticed her hands trembling as she reached for the spoon. "Slowly," he cautioned. "If you have not eaten much, going too fast will make you sick." She nodded, but seemed incapable of taking her own advice, spooning the soup into her mouth like it might disappear if she did not eat it quickly enough. Samuel ate his own meal in silence, giving her space and time to satisfy the worst of her hunger. When she had finished the first bowl, he refilled it without asking. This time she ate more slowly, and some color began to return to her pale cheeks. "My name is Samuel Zimmerman," he said after a while. "I own this ranch." The woman set down her spoon and met his eyes. "Willa Owens," she said. "Those are my children. Lily is the youngest, she just turned 3, then Thomas, he is 6, and Margaret is 7. "Where are you headed, Mrs. Owens?" Something flickered in her eyes. "Miss Owens," she corrected quietly, "and I am not entirely sure, just away from where we were." Samuel waited, but she did not elaborate. He could see the exhaustion pulling at her, the way her eyelids kept drooping despite her efforts to stay alert and aware. "You are safe here," he said simply. "Get some rest. We can talk more in the morning." Willa looked at him for a long moment, and Samuel wondered what she saw. He knew he was not much to look at, his face weathered from years in the sun, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow from a long-ago fight he barely remembered. But he hoped she saw honesty there, at least. A man who meant what he said. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not know how to repay you for your kindness." "I am not asking for repayment, just rest." She stood slowly, swaying a bit, and Samuel resisted the urge to reach out and steady her. She made her way to the bedroom and closed the door softly behind her. Samuel heard the rustle of fabric, the creak of the bed frame, and then silence. He built up the fire and settled into his father's old rocking chair with a blanket, knowing he would not sleep much. His mind was too full of questions. Where had Willa Owens come from? What was she running from? And what kind of man let a woman and 3 children travel alone through New Mexico territory, where Apache raids were still a real threat, and bandits preyed on anyone foolish or desperate enough to travel without protection? The answer to that last question came to him quickly. No good man, that was certain. When dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Samuel rose stiffly from the chair and started coffee. He was just slicing salt pork for breakfast when he heard the bedroom door open. Willa emerged, her hair still tangled but her face washed clean. In the morning light, he could see she was younger than he had initially thought, probably not yet 30. She had a pretty face, delicate features that spoke of easier times, though her eyes held shadows that suggested she had seen more hardship than any person should. "The children?" Samuel asked. "Still sleeping. I think they are making up for weeks of sleeping rough." She hesitated in the doorway. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Samuel gestured to the coffee pot. "Pour us both some coffee if you would like. Cups are in that cabinet." They worked in companionable silence, and soon the smell of frying salt pork and cornmeal mush filled the small house. Samuel set the table while Willa watched, and he could feel her eyes on him, still wary, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. "I need to know," he said as they sat down to eat. "Are you running from the law?" Willa's eyes widened in shock. "No, no, nothing like that." "Then what?" She was quiet for so long Samuel thought she might not answer. Then quietly she said, "I am running from my brother-in-law." Samuel waited. "My husband died 8 months ago," Willa continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thrown from a horse, broke his neck. We had been living on his family's ranch outside Amarillo in Texas. After he died, his brother Hiram said he would take care of us. I thought he meant as families should, but what he really meant was that he expected me to become his wife. He already had a wife, mind you. He just figured he could have us both." Samuel's hands tightened on his coffee cup, "And when you refused, he got mean. Started saying the children were not my husband's, that I was an unfit mother. He was going to take them from me, give them to his wife to raise while he sent me away, or worse." She looked down at her hands. "So I left. In the middle of the night, I took what little money I had hidden away, packed what we could carry, and we walked." "You walked from Amarillo?" Samuel could not keep the disbelief from his voice. "That was over 200 miles. We caught a few rides. A freight wagon for a day, a farmer heading to market another time, but mostly we walked." She raised her chin, that fierce pride blazing in her eyes again. "I would have walked to California if that was what it took to keep my children safe." Samuel believed her. Looking at this woman, thin and exhausted but unbroken, he believed she would have walked to the ends of the earth for those kids sleeping in his bed. "What is your plan now?" he asked gently. Willa's shoulders sagged. "I do not have one, not really. I thought maybe I could find work in Roswell as a seamstress or a cook. I am good with my hands and I can work hard. I just need enough to feed my children and find us a place to stay." Samuel thought about Roswell, the small town that served the ranchers and farmers scattered across this part of New Mexico territory. It was growing, true, with the railroad bringing new people and new opportunities. But work for a single woman with 3 children, that would be hard to come by. People talked, and even though Willa's situation was innocent, there would be those who would judge her harshly for being a woman alone. "Stay here," he said before he could think better of it. Willa's head snapped up. "What? Stay here, at least for a while until you get your feet under you." Samuel spoke quickly, working out the details even as he proposed them. "I need help around the ranch. The house is a mess. I can barely cook anything beyond beans and beef soup, and I have been meaning to expand my vegetable garden but never have time. You could help with that, and in exchange, you and the children would have a roof over your heads and food in your bellies." "Mr. Zimmerman, I could not possibly." "Samuel. And yes, you could. It makes sense for both of us. You need a safe place and I need help. Consider it a business arrangement." Willa studied him intently, and Samuel forced himself to meet her gaze steadily. He knew what she was thinking, knew she was trying to determine whether this was a genuine offer or if he had ulterior motives. He could not blame her. From what she had told him, the last man who offered to help her had wanted something she was not willing to give. "Just to be clear," he said carefully, "I have a bunkhouse out back where my ranch hands sleep when I hire them for roundup. It needs some fixing up, but it is sound. You and the children could stay there. This arrangement would be purely practical." Something in Willa's expression softened. "You are a good man, Samuel Zimmerman." "I am a practical man," he corrected, though he felt heat rise in his cheeks. "So do we have an agreement?" Willa extended her hand across the table. "We have an agreement." Her hand was small in his, the skin rough from hard work, but her grip was firm. Samuel felt something shift in his chest, something that had nothing to do with practical arrangements and everything to do with the way the morning light caught in her dark hair. He released her hand quickly and stood, clearing his throat. "I will start on the bunkhouse after breakfast. Should be ready by tonight." Over the next few hours, Samuel worked harder than he had in months, repairing the bunkhouse with single-minded determination. He replaced rotted boards, patched holes in the roof, and scrubbed years of dust and neglect from the windows and floors. Meanwhile, Willa kept the children occupied in the main house, and through the open door, Samuel could hear their laughter for the first time. The sound made him smile despite himself. It had been a long time since there had been laughter on this ranch. 5 years of living alone, of eating solitary meals and talking only to his horses, had made him forget what it was like to have people around. By late afternoon, the bunkhouse was as ready as he could make it. It was small, just one room with a pot-bellied stove in the corner and 4 narrow cots lined against the walls. But it was clean and dry, and the stove threw enough heat to keep out the October chill. Willa came to inspect his work, leaving the children playing a game with pebbles in the yard. She walked slowly through the space, running her hand along the freshly scrubbed walls, testing the sturdiness of the cots. "It is perfect," she said finally. "Thank you. I will bring over some blankets and quilts from the house. And tomorrow we can go into town, get you and the children some proper clothes and supplies." "Samuel, you have already done so much part of the arrangement," he interrupted. "If you are going to work for me, you need proper clothes. Those dresses are falling apart." It was true. In the daylight, he could see just how threadbare her clothing was, the fabric worn thin and patched in multiple places. The children were no better. They needed everything from shoes to winter coats. Willa bit her lip, clearly struggling with her pride again. Samuel was learning to recognize that look. "Consider it an advance on your wages," he suggested. "You can pay me back through your work." That seemed to satisfy her pride, and she nodded. "All right, thank you." That evening, Samuel watched from his porch as Willa settled the children into the bunkhouse. She had made it as cozy as possible with the supplies he had provided, hanging a blanket to section off a private area for herself, and arranging the children's cots near the stove where it was warmest. Little Lily clutched a rag doll that had seen better days, while Thomas proudly showed his mother how he had arranged his few possessions on the shelf Samuel had hastily built. Margaret helped her mother make up the beds, her movements careful and precise. Samuel noticed she watched him through the window, her young face serious and protective. Clearly, she had appointed herself guardian of her family. The next morning, Samuel hitched his wagon and the 5 of them made the journey into Roswell. The town had grown considerably since he had first arrived in New Mexico territory. What had started as a small settlement along the Pecos River now boasted several stores, a hotel, 2 saloons, a church, and even a small school. As they rolled down the main street, Samuel noticed people staring. He supposed they made an odd sight, a single man driving a wagon with a woman and 3 children. He could practically hear the gossip starting already. Let them talk, he thought. Willa and her children needed supplies, and he was not about to let small-town gossip stop him from helping them. At the general store, Samuel introduced Willa to Martha Patterson, the owner's wife and the closest thing Roswell had to a moral authority. Martha was a good woman, kind-hearted despite her tendency to involve herself in everyone's business. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Miss Willa Owens and her children. Miss Owens will be helping me manage my household in exchange for room and board." Martha's sharp eyes took in everything, from Willa's worn dress to the children's bare feet. To her credit, her expression softened with sympathy rather than judgment. "Welcome to Roswell, Miss Owens, and what beautiful children you have." She bent down to smile at Lily. "What is your name, sweetheart, Lily?" the little girl whispered, hiding her face against her mother's skirt. "Well, Lily, we have peppermint sticks by the counter. Would you like one?" "You and your brother and sister." Three little heads bobbed enthusiastically, and Martha laughed. "Samuel, you go ahead and get what you need. I will help Miss Owens with the children's things." For the next hour, Samuel busied himself selecting supplies while Martha outfitted Willa and the children. When they finally gathered at the counter to settle accounts, Samuel was startled by the pile of packages. Dresses and shirts, stockings and shoes, coats and hats, along with fabric for sewing and thread in various colors. "Mrs. Patterson, this is too much," Willa protested. "Nonsense," Martha said briskly. "You need these things and Samuel here can afford it. Cannot you, Samuel?" Samuel bit back a smile at being volunteered so directly, but he nodded. "Put it all on my account, Martha." As Martha tallied the purchases, she leaned in close to Samuel and lowered her voice. "That woman has been through something terrible. I can see it in her eyes." "You are doing a good thing helping her." "She is helping me," Samuel replied, equally quiet. "I really do need someone to manage the household." Martha gave him a knowing look that made Samuel's ears burn, but she did not comment further. She just patted his hand and said, "Well, you bring them to church on Sunday. It will help with the gossip if people see you are all respectable." Samuel had not set foot in a church since his mother's funeral, but he found himself agreeing. Martha was right. The more normal they appeared, the less fodder for speculation. On the drive back to the ranch, the children chattered excitedly about their new clothes and the peppermint sticks Martha had given them. Even Margaret seemed to relax a bit, her serious little face breaking into smiles as Thomas made up an elaborate story about a dragon who ate peppermint. Willa sat beside Samuel on the wagon seat, quiet but no longer tense. She had a package in her lap, fabric for making curtains, she had told him. As if reading his thoughts, she spoke. "I have been thinking about the house. If you do not mind, I would like to make some improvements. Nothing major, just curtains for the windows, maybe some cushions for the chairs. It would make it more comfortable." "You do not have to ask my permission," Samuel said. "It is your home too, at least for now. I do not want to overstep." Samuel glanced at her, taking in the proud set of her jaw, the way her hands gripped the fabric tightly. "Willa, I meant what I said. You are not a servant here. You are helping me and I am helping you. That makes us partners of a sort. If you want to make curtains or rearrange all the furniture or paint the walls purple, you go right ahead." That earned him a laugh, the first real laugh he had heard from her. It was a lovely sound, rich and warm, and it made something in Samuel's chest tighten in a way that was not entirely comfortable. Over the following weeks, Willa transformed the ranch house. Curtains appeared in the windows, cheerful gingham in blue and white. She made cushions for the hard wooden chairs and crocheted a doily for the table. The house began to smell of baking bread and simmering stews instead of dust and loneliness. The children thrived under the stability. Thomas followed Samuel around like a shadow whenever he would allow it, fascinated by the horses and eager to learn everything about ranch life. Margaret helped her mother with household tasks, but also revealed a love of books. When Samuel mentioned he had a small collection gathering dust, her eyes lit up with such joy that he found himself planning a trip to the larger town of Las Vegas just to buy her more. Little Lily was the one who truly captured Samuel's heart. She was shy at first, hiding behind her mother's skirts whenever he entered a room. But gradually, she warmed to him. It started with small things. She would bring him wildflowers she had picked or show him rocks she found interesting. One evening, she climbed into his lap while he sat on the porch and asked him to tell her about the stars. Samuel, who had spent countless nights under those same stars while working cattle drives, found himself sharing stories his own father had told him. Stories of cowboys and wild horses, of the constellations and the ancient myths behind them. Lily listened with rapt attention, her small hand curled trustingly in his. When Willa came to collect her daughter for bed, she paused in the doorway, and Samuel saw an expression on her face that made his heart skip. It was soft and warm and full of something he did not dare name. As October gave way to November, Samuel found himself looking forward to the end of each day in a way he never had before. Coming home was no longer a solitary affair. Now there were children's voices calling greetings, the smell of dinner cooking, and Willa's smile when he walked through the door. They fell into an easy rhythm. Willa managed the household with quiet efficiency, freeing Samuel to focus on the ranch work. But it was more than that. They talked in the evenings after the children were in bed, sharing stories of their pasts. Willa told him about her childhood in St. Louis, how she had met her husband at a church social and followed him to Texas full of dreams for their future. "He was a good man," she said one night, staring into the fire. "Not perfect, but good. He loved the children so much. When he died, I thought my world had ended. And then Hiram started his nonsense, and I realized the world was not done throwing troubles my way." "Do you think he will come looking for you?" Samuel asked, voicing the fear that had been nagging at him. Willa was quiet for a moment. "I do not know. Part of me thinks he was happy to be rid of us. The children were a burden to him, and I was refusing to cooperate. But another part of me worries he is too proud to let me go, that he sees it as a challenge to his authority." Samuel reached over and took her hand. It was the first time he had initiated such contact, and he felt her fingers tense in surprise before relaxing into his grip. "If he comes, I will handle it," he said firmly. "You and the children are under my protection now. I will not let anyone take you against your will." Willa's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Why are you doing this, Samuel? Why are you being so kind to us? You do not owe us anything." Samuel considered the question, really considered it. Why was he doing this? At first, it had been simple compassion, the instinct to help someone in need. But somewhere along the way, it had become more than that. Somewhere between Willa's first smile and the sound of children's laughter filling his home, his heart had gotten involved. "Because," he said slowly, choosing his words with care, "in the month you have been here, this place has felt more like a home than it ever did in the 5 years before. Because your children make me laugh, and your cooking makes me realize I was slowly starving myself to death on bad beans and worse coffee. Because you work harder than any ranch hand I have ever hired, and you never complain. And because when I think about you leaving, when I imagine this house going back to the way it was before, empty and quiet, it makes me feel like someone punched a hole in my chest." Willa stared at him, her lips parted in surprise. Samuel felt heat rising in his face but forced himself to continue. "I know this started as a practical arrangement, but Willa, somewhere along the way it became something else, at least for me. And I understand if you do not feel the same way. Lord knows you have been through enough without some rancher declaring his feelings and complicating your life further. But I could not keep pretending this was just about needing help around the house." For a long moment, Willa did not speak. She just looked at him, her dark eyes searching his face. Samuel's heart hammered in his chest. He had made a mistake. He had pushed too far, too fast, and now he was going to lose her. Then Willa squeezed his hand and a tear rolled down her cheek. "Samuel Zimmerman," she whispered, You are the best man I have ever known." "I am just a rancher with more dust than sense," he said, trying to lighten the mood even as hope bloomed in his chest. "No," Willa shook her head. "You are kind and patient and generous. You took us in when we had nothing. You asked for nothing in return. You have been wonderful with my children, treating them like they matter, like they are not just burdens to be endured. Do you know how rare that is?" She shifted closer to him on the sofa, still holding his hand. "I did not think I could feel this way again. After my husband died, after everything with Hiram, I thought I was done with men. I thought I would spend the rest of my life protecting my children and that would be enough. But then you happened." Samuel felt like he could not breathe. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I feel the same way. I am saying that when you come home each evening, my heart lifts. I am saying that I find excuses to be near you, to hear your voice. I am saying that somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you, Samuel Zimmerman, and I do not know what to do about it." The world seemed to stop. Samuel reached up with his free hand and gently cupped Willa's cheek, wiping away the tear with his thumb. "You could let me court you properly," he suggested softly. "We could take our time, do this right. I know you have been hurt, and I know you need to put your children first. I would never ask you to do otherwise. But Willa, I would like the chance to prove that not all men are like your brother-in-law. I would like the chance to show you what a good marriage could look like." Willa turned her face into his palm, her eyes closing. "I would like that too," she breathed. Samuel had never considered himself a romantic man. He was practical, straightforward, more comfortable with horses than people. But in that moment, sitting in the firelight with Willa's face in his hand and her confession hanging in the air between them, he understood what all those poets had been going on about. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She did not. Their lips met in a soft, tentative kiss that sent warmth flooding through Samuel's entire body. It was sweet and gentle and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, Willa was smiling, really smiling, and Samuel felt like he could conquer the world. Their courtship over the following weeks was a careful dance. Samuel was conscious of Willa's need to maintain propriety, both for her own peace of mind and for the sake of the children. They had already raised eyebrows in Roswell. He did not want to give the gossips any real ammunition. But there were stolen moments. A touch of hands while washing dishes, the brush of shoulders as they sat together reading in the evening. Long conversations on the porch after the children were asleep, talking about everything and nothing. Samuel found himself sharing things he had never told anyone. He told her about his father, who had died in the war when Samuel was just 15. About his mother, who had worked herself to exhaustion trying to keep their small farm going until she too passed away, leaving Samuel alone at 19. About the years he had spent drifting, working cattle drives and saving every penny until he had enough to buy this land and start over. Willa, in turn, opened up about her own past. Her father had been a shopkeeper in St. Louis, respectable but not wealthy. She had been raised to be a gentleman's wife, taught to sew and cook and manage a household. When she met her husband, Jacob Owens, she had thought she was marrying into security, and for a while she had been happy. Jacob was not perfect, she said one evening. He drank too much sometimes and he had a temper when things did not go his way, but he loved me and he loved the children. When he died, I thought I could manage. I thought his family would help us. I was so naive. You were not naive, Samuel corrected gently. You expected people to act with decency. That is not naive. That is having faith in humanity. A faith that was badly misplaced. Not misplaced, just directed at the wrong people. Samuel took her hand, lacing their fingers together. There are good people in the world, Willa. You just had the misfortune to encounter some bad ones first. As November turned to December, life on the ranch settled into a comfortable pattern. The children were thriving. Thomas had taken to ranch life like he was born to it, and Samuel started teaching him basic horse care and how to mend fences. Margaret had devoured every book in Samuel's collection and started writing stories of her own, which she shyly shared with him in the evenings. Lily followed Samuel everywhere, her small hand often tucked trustingly into his. It was Lily who first called him Papa. It happened one morning when Samuel was getting ready to ride out to check the herd. Lily came running up, her blonde curls bouncing, and threw her arms around his legs. "Be careful, Papa," she said earnestly. "The cows might step on you." Samuel froze, his heart stuttering in his chest. He looked over at Willa, who had gone very still in the doorway. She looked worried, like she was afraid he would correct the child, would remind her that he was not her father. Instead, Samuel knelt down so he was at Lily's level. "I will be very careful," he promised solemnly. "And when I come back, maybe we can go look for more of those pretty rocks you like." Lily beamed and kissed his cheek before running back to her mother. Samuel stood slowly, his eyes meeting Willa's across the yard. She had tears on her cheeks, but she was smiling. That evening, after the children were in bed, Willa brought it up. "I am sorry about what Lily said this morning. I did not coach her to say that, I promise." "I will talk to her about—" "No," Samuel interrupted. "Do not, please." Willa looked at him in surprise. Samuel ran a hand through his hair, trying to find the right words. "Willa, I love those kids, all three of them. Thomas with his endless questions, Margaret with her stories, Lily with her rocks and flowers. They have become mine in my heart, if not in blood. If Lily wants to call me Papa, then I would be honored." More tears spilled down Willa's cheeks. "You mean that?" "I do. I know I can never replace their father, but I would like to be a father to them if you would let me. If they want me." Willa crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. Samuel held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the rightness of having her in his arms. "They already love you," she whispered against his shirt, "and so do I." "I love you too," Samuel said, the words coming easily now. "Willa, I want to marry you. I want to make this official, make us a real family, but I do not want to rush you. We can wait as long as you need." Willa pulled back to look up at him. "What if I do not want to wait? What if I am tired of being afraid of what people think, tired of pretending this is just a business arrangement?" "Samuel, I am ready. If you are asking me to marry you, then my answer is yes." Samuel felt joy surge through him, pure and bright. "You are sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything in my life." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, pouring all his love and hope and promises into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I will go to town tomorrow and talk to the preacher. We can be married before Christmas if that suits you." "That suits me perfectly." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Roswell. Martha Patterson helped Willa make a new dress for the occasion, a simple but elegant creation in deep blue. The children were scrubbed and polished, wearing their finest clothes. Thomas stood beside Samuel as his best man, so proud he looked like he might burst. Margaret and Lily stood with their mother, Margaret holding a bouquet of winter wildflowers they had gathered that morning. The church was packed. In the weeks since Samuel had first brought Willa to town, she had made friends among the local women. They had recognized one of their own, a woman trying to make the best of a difficult situation, and they had welcomed her. Now they filled the pews, witnessing with approval as Samuel and Willa spoke their vows. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Samuel kissed Willa to the sound of applause and cheering. Looking out at the smiling faces, at the children beaming at them, at Martha Patterson wiping happy tears from her eyes, Samuel felt something settle in his chest. This was what he had been missing all those lonely years. This was home. The reception was held at the ranch, with neighbors bringing food and drink. Someone produced a fiddle, and there was dancing in the yard. Samuel danced with his new wife, then with each of his new daughters, and even taught Thomas a few basic steps. As the sun set and the guests began to drift away, Samuel stood on his porch and surveyed his kingdom. The house that had seemed so empty just 2 months ago now overflowed with life and love. The barn where he had first found Willa sheltering with her children was now full of well-fed livestock. The land that had felt like just property now felt like a true home. Willa came to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his. "Happy?" she asked. "Happier than I thought possible," Samuel replied honestly. "You? Yes, so very yes." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Thank you, Samuel, for taking us in, for giving us a home, for loving us." "I should be thanking you. You gave me a family. You turned a house into a home. You made me remember what it means to have something worth fighting for." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Inside, they could hear the children getting ready for bed, their voices carrying through the open window. "You think we will really be safe here?" Willa asked quietly. "Do you think Hiram will leave us alone?" It was a question that had been nagging at Samuel as well. He had made inquiries through some of his contacts, men he had known from his cattle drive days. Word was that Willa Owens had been making noise about his sister-in-law running off with his dead brother's children, claiming she had no right to take them. But Texas was a long way from New Mexico territory, and Hiram had his own problems. His wife had left him, taking their own children, and he was facing financial troubles. Still, Samuel was not naive enough to think the danger was completely past. Men like Hiram, men who saw women and children as property to be controlled, did not give up easily. "I think we are as safe as we can be," Samuel said carefully. "But I want you to know that whatever happens, I will protect you and the children. That is my vow to you, Willa. Not just as your husband, but as their father. No one will take this family from me." Willa squeezed his hand. "I know. I trust you, Samuel, completely." The first year of their marriage passed in a blur of joy and hard work. Samuel expanded his operation, buying more cattle and bringing in a couple of ranch hands to help during the busy seasons. Willa's vegetable garden flourished, providing fresh produce that she preserved for the winter months. The children grew like weeds, all 3 of them shooting up so fast they needed new clothes every few months. Margaret turned 9 and started attending the school in Roswell. She loved it, coming home each day full of stories about her lessons and the friends she was making. Thomas, now 7, was still too young for regular school, but Willa taught him his letters and numbers at home. He was bright and eager to learn, though his true passion was for the ranch. Samuel started giving him small chores, teaching him the skills he would need if he wanted to be a rancher himself someday. Lily, at 4 years old, was the sunshine of the family. She had completely overcome her shyness, at least at home, and ruled the household with the benevolent tyranny that only the youngest child could manage. Samuel was completely wrapped around her little finger, and he knew it. In the spring, Willa discovered she was expecting a baby. Samuel was overjoyed, though he tried to temper his excitement for Willa's sake. He knew childbirth was dangerous, and the memory of his mother's stories about women who died bringing new life into the world haunted him. But Willa bloomed with the pregnancy, seeming to grow more beautiful every day. Her belly swelled as summer turned to fall, and Samuel found himself talking to the unborn child, telling it stories and making promises about the life they would have together. The baby came on a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year and 2 days after Samuel had found Willa in his barn. Martha Patterson served as midwife, shooing Samuel out of the room with instructions to keep the children occupied and boil water. Samuel paced the yard with Thomas while Margaret read to Lily inside, all of them anxiously waiting for news. When he finally heard the thin wail of a newborn, Samuel's knees nearly gave out with relief. Martha emerged an hour later, beaming. "You have a son, Samuel. A healthy, strong boy, and Willa is doing fine, just tired." Samuel rushed into the bedroom to find Willa propped up against pillows, looking exhausted but radiant. In her arms was the smallest person Samuel had ever seen, a wrinkled red baby with a shock of dark hair. "Our son," Willa said softly, her eyes shining. "Would you like to hold him?" Samuel took the baby with shaking hands, cradling the tiny body against his chest. The infant opened his eyes, dark blue like all newborns, and seemed to look right at Samuel. Something in Samuel's chest cracked wide open, a love so fierce and overwhelming that it brought tears to his eyes. "He is perfect," Samuel whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you, Willa. Thank you for this gift." They named him Jacob Samuel, honoring both the father he would never know and the father who would raise him. The other children were enchanted with their new baby brother. Even Thomas, who Samuel had worried might feel displaced as the only boy, fell in love with the squirming bundle. As Samuel sat on the porch that evening, rocking his infant son while Willa rested inside, he marveled at the strange twists life could take. Just over a year ago, he had been alone, resigned to a life of solitary bachelorhood. Now he had a wife he loved beyond measure, 4 children who called him Papa, and a future full of promise. The years that followed were not without challenges. There was the drought that threatened their water supply, forcing Samuel to drill a new well at considerable expense. There was the winter Thomas got pneumonia, and they spent 3 terrifying weeks not knowing if he would survive. There was the day Margaret came home crying because some cruel boy had called her family strange, saying it was not natural for a woman to have children by 2 different fathers. Samuel had held his daughter close and told her that family was not about blood. It was about love and commitment and choosing to stand together no matter what the world threw at you. He told her that he was proud to be her father, blood or not, and that anyone who had a problem with their family could answer to him. Margaret had wiped her tears and hugged him tight. "I love you, Papa," she whispered. And Samuel's heart, which he had thought could not possibly hold any more love, somehow expanded again. But the challenges were far outnumbered by the joys. There was the year the ranch turned its first real profit, enough for Samuel to finally feel secure in their future. There was the Christmas when they surprised the children with a new puppy, a wriggling ball of fur that Lily immediately named Buttons. There was the summer evening when Samuel taught Margaret to ride his gentlest horse, watching with pride as she conquered her initial fear and discovered the joy of flying across the open range. When Jacob was 2, Willa became pregnant again. This time she carried twins, a fact that Dr. Harrison discovered during one of his visits from Roswell. "Twins," Samuel had repeated weakly, his face going pale. Willa had laughed at his expression. "We will manage, Samuel. We always do." The twins, a boy and a girl they named James and Julia, arrived on a stormy March night. The birth was harder than Jacob's, and there were moments when Samuel feared he would lose Willa. But she was strong, his wife, stronger than anyone he had ever known. She came through it exhausted but triumphant, cradling both babies with the help of Martha, who had once again served as midwife. With 6 children now filling the house, Samuel built an addition, expanding the ranch house to include more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. He also hired a permanent ranch hand, a young man named Charlie who was good with the cattle and even better with the children, always willing to show Thomas and Jacob the ropes. Life was full and chaotic and perfect. Margaret, now 15, had grown into a beautiful young woman with her mother's determination and a love of learning that would not be quenched. She talked about becoming a teacher someday, and Samuel was determined to make that dream possible, even if it meant sending her to the normal school in Las Cruces when the time came. Thomas, at 13, was already nearly as tall as Samuel and showed every sign of becoming a fine rancher. He had a gift with horses that amazed even the experienced hands Samuel hired during roundup. More importantly, he had a good heart. Samuel often found him helping his younger siblings or doing extra chores without being asked. Lily, at 10, was still the family's ray of sunshine, though she had developed a stubborn streak that both amused and frustrated Samuel in equal measure. She had her mother's skill with a needle and had started helping Willa with sewing projects for the family and even taking commissions from women in town. Jacob, now 4, was into everything, his curiosity boundless and his energy seemingly endless. The twins, at 2, were just starting to develop their own personalities. James was quiet and thoughtful, content to play with his toy blocks for hours. Julia was the opposite, loud and demanding, and already showing signs of being as headstrong as her sister Lily. Samuel often found himself overwhelmed by the noise and chaos of their household. But it was a good kind of overwhelmed, the kind that came from having more blessings than you knew what to do with. One evening, after getting the younger children to bed, Samuel and Willa sat on the porch as they so often did. It had become their ritual, this quiet time together after the day's work was done. Willa was mending one of Thomas's shirts while Samuel whittled a new toy horse for Jacob. "Do you ever think about that night?" Willa asked suddenly. "The night you found us in your barn," Samuel set down his whittling. "Sometimes. Do you, all the time?" Willa's hand stilled on her mending. "I think about how desperate I was, how scared. I did not know where we would go or what we would do. I just knew I had to keep moving, had to keep my children safe. You were so fierce," Samuel remembered. "Even exhausted and starving, you looked ready to fight me if I threatened your children. I was terrified you would send us away. Or worse, that you would be like Hiram." Willa looked at him, her eyes soft in the lantern light. "I never imagined you would be kind. I never imagined you would take us in, give us a home, give us a family. I never imagined I would be lucky enough to find a woman like you. I had resigned myself to living alone, Willa. I thought that was my lot in life. And then you appeared in my barn like some kind of miracle, and everything changed." Willa set aside her mending and moved closer to him on the bench, tucking herself against his side. Samuel wrapped his arm around her, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "We have built a good life together," she said softly. "The best life," Samuel agreed, "though it is not what I expected." "What did you expect?" Samuel considered the question. "I do not know. Maybe a quiet existence, just me and my cattle and my horses, peaceful, predictable. Are you disappointed?" "God, no." Samuel pulled her closer. "Willa, you and the children are the best thing that ever happened to me. This life, this beautiful, chaotic, messy life we have created together, it is more than I ever dared to dream." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. A horse nickered in the barn. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Inside the house, one of the twins cried out briefly before settling back to sleep. "Samuel," Willa's voice was hesitant, "there is something I need to tell you." Samuel's stomach clenched. That tone never preceded good news. "What is it?" "I got a letter today, from Hiram's wife. Ex-wife, I should say. She left him 2 years ago and they are finally divorced." Samuel waited, sensing there was more. "She wrote to warn me. Hiram has been drinking heavily, and he has been talking about us again, about how I stole his brother's children and ran off with some rancher. She thinks he might try to cause trouble. The protective instinct that had driven Samuel since the night he found Willa surged to life. Let him try. I have legal adoption papers for all 3 children. You are my wife. We have witnesses who will testify to the life we have built here. He has no claim on any of you. I know all of that logically, but Samuel, I am still afraid. What if he comes here? What if he tries to take the children? What if he hurts someone? Samuel turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. Listen to me, Willa. I will not let anything happen to you or our children. Any of our children. I have friends in town, people who respect us and will stand with us. Sheriff Morrison knows our situation. And if Hiram is fool enough to show his face here, he will find himself facing a man who has far more to lose than he does. I do not want violence. Neither do I. But I will do whatever it takes to protect this family. Willa nodded, though Samuel could see the worry still lingering in her eyes. He wished he could take that fear away, could promise her with absolute certainty that Hiram would never bother them. But life did not come with guarantees. All he could offer was his commitment to stand between his family and any threat. 2 weeks later, Hiram Owens arrived in Roswell. Samuel first heard about it from Charlie, who had been in town buying supplies. Boss, there is a man in town asking questions about you and Miss Willa. Well, Mrs. Zimmerman, I mean. Describing himself as her brother-in-law, he has been drinking at the saloon and talking loud about his rights. Samuel's blood ran cold. What has he been saying? Claiming you took advantage of a desperate woman, that you stole his brother's children. Most folks are not paying him much mind. Everyone in town knows you, and Mrs. Zimmerman knows what a good family you have. But he is making a nuisance of himself. Keep the children close to the house, Samuel instructed. I am going to town. He found Hiram Owens in the Silver Dollar Saloon, exactly where Charlie had said he would be. The man was in his 40s, with thinning hair and the bloated face of someone who spent too much time with a bottle. He was regaling anyone who would listen with his tale of woe. Took my brother's children right out from under my nose, Hiram was saying. I was going to raise them proper, give them a good Christian home, and she ran off with them. Probably had this rancher fellow waiting all along. Samuel walked up to the bar and stood directly in Hiram's line of sight. I think you have been telling lies long enough. Hiram's eyes widened when he saw Samuel, but then they narrowed with drink-fueled bravado. So you are the man who stole my family. They were never your family, Samuel said evenly. They were your brother's family. And when your brother died, you tried to force Willa into an immoral situation. She fled to protect herself and her children. That is the truth. That is her version, Hiram spat. I was offering her a home, offering to care for those children. You were offering to make her your second wife while you were still married, and you were planning to take her children away from her. Do not try to dress it up as charity. The saloon had gone quiet. Everyone was watching the confrontation with avid interest. Samuel kept his voice calm but let his words carry. Willa is my wife now, legally married. I have legally adopted Margaret, Thomas, and Lily. They are my children in the eyes of the law and in the eyes of God. You have no claim on them, no rights to them. And if you continue to harass my family, I will have Sheriff Morrison arrest you for disturbing the peace. Hiram stood, swaying slightly. You cannot keep me from my own blood. They are not your blood. They were your brother's children, and now they are mine. And unlike you, I actually love them and care for their welfare. Samuel took a step closer, lowering his voice so only Hiram could hear. I know what you tried to do to Willa. I know you are a man who thinks women and children are property to be owned and controlled. but I am here to tell you that your property rights end at my property line. And if you set foot on my ranch, if you come anywhere near my wife or my children, I will defend my family with everything I have. You understand me?" Hiram's face had gone red, a mix of anger and humiliation. But Samuel saw something else in his eyes too: fear. He recognized that Samuel was not bluffing, that he was dealing with a man who would do whatever it took to protect what was his. "You will regret this," Hiram muttered, but his words lacked conviction. "No," Samuel said quietly, "I will not. The only thing I regret is that Willa had to suffer your attentions even for a moment. Now, I suggest you get out of Roswell and go back to Texas. There is nothing for you here." He turned and walked out of the saloon without waiting for a response. Behind him, he heard the murmur of conversation starting up again, and he knew the story would be all over town by nightfall. Good. Let people know that he would not tolerate anyone threatening his family. Sheriff Morrison was waiting outside, leaning against the wall. He was a good man, honest and fair, and he had become a friend over the years. "Heard there was trouble," the sheriff said. "Nothing I could not handle, but Morrison, I need you to keep an eye on Hiram Owens. If he causes any problems, I want him run out of town." Morrison nodded. "Already planned on it. I have been hearing his talk since he arrived yesterday. Man is a fool and a bully. Do not worry, Samuel. I will make sure he does not bother your family." "I appreciate that." When Samuel returned to the ranch, he found Willa waiting on the porch, her face pale and drawn. She had clearly been watching for him, and the relief in her eyes when she saw him made Samuel's heart ache. "He is in town," Samuel said without preamble. "I spoke with him, made it clear he is not welcome here." "What did he say?" "Nothing worth repeating." "But Willa, I do not think he will be a problem. He is all bluster and whiskey courage. When faced with actual opposition, he backed down. Sheriff Morrison is keeping an eye on him." Willa nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. Samuel pulled her close, feeling her tremble against him. "It is all right," he murmured into her hair. "We are safe. The children are safe. I will not let him hurt us. I know. I trust you, Samuel. It is just hard having him so close. It brings back memories I would rather forget. He will be gone soon." Men like that do not stay where they are not wanted. Samuel was right. By the next morning, word came that Hiram Owens had left Roswell, heading back toward Texas. Sheriff Morrison had strongly suggested that his continued presence was not welcome, and Hiram had apparently decided that discretion was the better part of valor. Over the following weeks, Willa gradually relaxed. The tension that had gripped her since receiving that first warning letter slowly eased. She laughed more freely, slept more soundly, and the shadows that had haunted her eyes began to fade. Life returned to its normal, beautiful chaos. The children grew and thrived. The ranch prospered. And Samuel and Willa's love deepened with each passing day, strengthened by the trials they had weathered together. Years continued to pass in a blur of seasons. Margaret went off to the normal school in Las Cruces, just as she had dreamed, and returned as a certified teacher. She took a position at the school in Roswell and eventually married a kind young man named David who worked at the bank. They built a house in town, and when Margaret gave Samuel and Willa their first grandchild, Samuel felt his heart might burst with joy. Thomas took over more and more of the ranch operations as Samuel slowed down. At 25, he was a better rancher than Samuel had ever been, with innovative ideas about breeding and land management. He married a neighbor's daughter, a sweet girl named Sarah, and they built a house on the far corner of the property. Lily used her sewing skills to open a small dress shop in Roswell. It flourished, and she became known throughout the territory for her beautiful work. She married later than her siblings, choosing carefully, And when she finally said yes to a quiet carpenter named Robert, Samuel approved wholeheartedly. Jacob, James, and Julia were still at home, now teenagers full of energy and opinions. They brought noise and laughter and occasional chaos, keeping Samuel and Willa busy. One evening, as Samuel and Willa sat on their porch, now graying and moving a bit slower but still very much in love, they watched the sun set over the land they had built together. "How many years has it been?" Willa asked, her hand in Samuel's. 23 years since I found you in my barn," Samuel replied. 22 years since we married. "The best years of my life," Willa said softly. "Mine too." Samuel raised her hand to his lips, kissing her weathered knuckles. "You know, when I first saw you that night, 3 children asleep in your arms, I thought I was just helping someone in need. And now I know I was not helping you. You were saving me. You and those children, you brought life back to this place. You brought life back to me." Willa leaned her head on his shoulder. "We saved each other, I think." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as their grandchildren played in the yard. Margaret's 3 children, Thomas's 2, and Lily's baby, all running and laughing under the watchful eyes of their parents. The ranch that had once been so empty now overflowed with family. "You remember what you said to me that first night?" Willa asked. "When I tried to leave the next morning." "I said you were not going anywhere," Samuel recalled. "You were right. I never left. This became my home." "You became my home." Samuel pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair, now streaked with gray but still familiar and dear. "And you became mine." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Samuel reflected on the strange and wonderful path his life had taken. He had been alone, resigned to solitude, and then one October night, everything changed. A desperate woman seeking shelter, 3 children needing protection, and a barn that became the starting point of the greatest adventure of his life. He thought about all the years since, the challenges and triumphs, the laughter and tears, the quiet moments and the chaotic ones. He thought about the children they had raised together, both the ones Willa had brought to him and the ones they had created together. He thought about the grandchildren now filling his home with noise and joy. Most of all, he thought about the woman beside him, the woman who had transformed his life in ways he could never have imagined. Willa, who had been strong enough to flee an impossible situation, brave enough to trust a stranger, and loving enough to build a life with him. "I love you," he said, the words as true and necessary now as they had been the first time he spoke them. "I love you too," Willa replied. Today, tomorrow, and every day after that. The future stretched before them, full of promise. There would be more grandchildren, Samuel was certain. More birthdays and holidays, more worries and joys, more sunsets watched from this porch. There would be sorrows too, inevitably. But they would face them together, as they had faced everything else. As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared, Samuel Zimmerman held his wife close and gave thanks for the night he found her sheltering in his barn, 3 children asleep in her arms. That moment had changed everything. It had given him a family, a purpose, and a love that would last until his final breath and beyond. The ranch house glowed with warm light from the windows, full of the sounds of family and life and love. And Samuel knew, with absolute certainty, that he was the luckiest man who ever lived. He had found his home, not in the land or the house, but in the woman beside him and the family they had built together. This was his legacy. Not the cattle or the horses or the acres of land, but the love that filled this place. The children and grandchildren who would carry forward the values he and Willa had tried to instill. The story of 2 people who found each other when they needed it most and built something beautiful together. And as Samuel and Willa sat together under the stars, hands clasped and hearts intertwined, They knew that whatever years remained to them would be spent exactly like this, together, grateful for every moment, cherishing every blessing and loving each other until the very end.